Okay, guys, I'm hoping that we are back and in place. I had a couple of false starts there, so give me a wave if you managed to join in again, and so sorry about that. I'm not quite sure what happened, but sometimes technology does that to us, so my apologies. So we were leaving off on our botanical image, which I had stamped and then kind of base colored, if you will, with our sea glass. Came through again with the dusk, and now I'm coming in with my ocean waves. So if you're just joining, I'm going to keep on coloring. This time I've grabbed my ocean waves, and I'm just going to add a little bit more definition around our flower here, around those petals. Give everybody a chance to jump back in. And I can see a couple more of you. Hi, Stacy. Hi, Sue. Thanks for coming back in. Sorry about that. Sometimes technology doesn't agree with what we want to do. So my apologies. Okay, so I've got my flower partially colored in here. I'm just going to be adding my second color in here and shading things in. So I've got kind of a stripy effect on some of these larger areas. So what I'll do is then come back with my sea glass, and I'm going to use this as kind of a blender and just bring this back in and soften some of those edges. Again, this is not anything terribly precise. I'm just sort of getting some light and dark areas in with all of the areas of my stamped image. So come in here, and then maybe even a little bit more down here in the stem. So there we go. You can see quite easy to do. And even though I know that, the leaves are not technically blue, it is nice to have a sort of different tone-on-tone effect, really keeping everything within a certain color family. So again, the three were dusk, sea glass, and ocean wave. So these three artist markers. Now, of course, you could do this with any of the combinations of artist markers as well. Now what I can do is simply die cut this element and pop it on the front of my card. So I'll show you once again the card that we've done here. And once again, very simple. I've just die cut this. I have popped it up on some foam tape. I think you can see that dimension in there. And I really like this ability when you've got a simple style of card to add a little bit of dimension with some foam tape. That really does help it to not look maybe so plain, but it gives it a little bit of lift in there. I've got my hello die cut element on there, just simply cut from black. Pop that down, and then a little bit of gold embroidery thread. Now, what I like about this too, even though it is very simple, and I like it the way it is and would certainly send it the way it is, you can always, if you wanted something more to your card, you could always work in some embellishments. You could have put this onto a pattern paper or done that brayering technique that we just looked at. So lots of different options for this. So you can keep it super simple, or you can go a little bit more elaborate if you want to. Okay, thanks to all of you who are joining us again. And once again, sorry for the weirdo glitch in our technology, but let's move on and let's talk about embossing. Now, this card is featuring two of the elements from our stamp set with some heat embossing. And for this, I'm using my old favorite, the rose gold embossing powder. Now, this one I just think is such a classic, and it goes with everything. And in this case, I'm coloring with our metallic sprays. These are the shimmer sprays. So let's take a look at how to do this. I'm going to move aside my artist markers. I've got those in the way. And let's bring back in the Misty. So for this one, I'm going to get my piece of cardstock. And you know, with heat embossing, you need to have a couple of things on hand ready to go. So I'll be working with my embossing ink pad. I've got my embossing powder at the ready as well. I'm just going to go ahead and untwist that lid. I also need to have a piece of scrap paper. I've got that. This is going to be my funnel, catch my excess embossing powder. And I also like to have on hand something to kind of whisk away any little stray granules of embossing powder. And I just use a dry fine tip brush for this. Okay, so for this one, I'm just going to pop off 2 of the stamps. I want to use this one right here, and then this one that kind of matches, that's going the opposite direction on the stamp set. So I may as well just stamp them and emboss them in one go. So we'll organize these. I kind of want the ends to touch a little bit so that they kind of come together in almost a V shape. I want this one to be definitely higher though. Okay, so I've got that, and then we'll ink this up using my embossing ink pad. Freshly re-inked, by the way. It was running a little bit dry, so I had to re-ink that. But I still, especially with embossing, because it is clear on white, I always like to do it a second time, just for security. This is my insurance. Okay. So now, working quickly, I'm going to get my piece of scrap paper here, my embossing powder, and then just add this right on top. And many of you have done embossing, so this is not news to you, but if you are new to embossing, you just dump the embossing powder right on there, and it will stick with the embossing ink. Now I notice that I've got some excess embossing powder on here. This is where I just come in with my brush, tap off any excess, and then sort of whisk away any stray bits that I have here. And that fine tip brush will do the trick. Okay, so I'm going to set this aside and pour my embossing powder just right back into the jar. That way nothing goes to waste. This is the important part, is put the lid back on the jar so that it doesn't fly everywhere when you heat set it. So hang in there with me. I'm going to take a few seconds to heat set this, and then we're going to get it into coloring. I think it is all heat set. Oops, I've got one little piece there. I often find that it helps to really tilt the piece around in different lighting so that you can make sure that everything is shiny and melted and ready to be colored. Okay, so to color this in, I'm going to be using 2 of my favorite colors. I've got the Puffy Heart and I have the Orange Cream. Now these are the metallic shimmer sprays. So what you would normally think to do with them, of course, is to spray with the spray nozzle. So you'd spritz this, you can get some really cool backgrounds, and because it's got a shimmer to it, it will have a really beautiful soft shine. But what you can also do is simply decant some of this onto your craft mat and paint with it. Now what you do want to do is make sure that you shake it until you can hear that ball rattle in there, because that means that everything is mixed up. So I'm just going to give these a bit of a shake, and then what I can do is just simply use the straw part of this. I'm not sure what the technical term is for that. And just decant a little bit. You don't need a lot. I'm going to be diluting this with some water, so I know that I don't need much. I can always add a little bit more later too. Okay. Also, make sure that this is twisted on because you definitely don't want to accidentally knock this over and have it go everywhere. Okay, so again, I'll just spritz a little bit of water into a puddle next to my colors. And I'm going to use water brush to kind of paint this in. So this is the water brush I was using before. So it's not perfectly clean, but it'll work. So I'm going to pick up a little bit of water and just kind of make a bit of a wash here. Now, depending on how much color I want, the intensity of color, that will all depend on how much water I'm using in proportion to my spray. But you can see, again, you can get a really nice soft look. It is going to have a shimmer to it, not a really high shine, but it goes beautifully with the shine of the embossing powder. So you're getting the shine of the gold embossing, but you're also getting a really subtle shine from that spray. And the water is just going to help kind of move things around here. So this is with the orange cream. Kind of tap that in there. And then a little bit of that puffy heart. Now I can mix these. They're so compatible, these two colors, that I don't have to worry about making mud. Okay, so I'll come in here and just add a little bit more. I'm working wet on wet, so I'm not letting the orange dry before I come back with that puffy heart. So you can do that if you want to, but I kind of like the way they blend together. And again, if you find that you've got too much color or too strong of a color in any area, just come back with some more water and let that kind of blend out. Okay, now again, I'll use just the tip of my brush to come in through here in the stem areas. Okay, and there we go. Now when this dries, it will be lighter, of course, but not by a whole lot. So again, if you want to soften it, just come back in with some water. You can also blot as well with some tissue or even with a baby wipe. Now, what I do want to show you with the card that I've got here, I've got some spattering going on. Of course, the black is from my water brush, as we saw earlier, but I've also got some really faint, I think you can see that very, very faint pinkish on here. That is just very, very diluted puffy heart. So what you can do, of course, is mask off these two stamped and embossed pieces if you want to. And this is another way that you can use your dies that go along. So I just die cut two of the shapes from leftover scrap paper, and then you could just pop them on top. And then when you spatter, you don't risk getting the spatters in that area. But I'll just show you with my puffy heart. I'm going to add a little bit more water in here, make it really nice and watery. Again, just give a little bit of a tap. Get it nice and watery. That is going to dry for a really soft and pretty watercolor look. And then if you decide to go back and add the black spattering on there, that's going to create a really nice high contrast. So I'm going to let these dry. And when they do, I will have a really nice watercolor effect with the added benefit of that metallic shine. Okay, so I'm just going to mop this up and be sure and pop my water brush into some water so that I can make sure to get that nice and clean. Okay, so bringing back in my original card, you can see here I've got the hello going across here. Now I positioned the hello because, as you remember, when I put these two down, I've got a little gap in there in between this stem and that stem. And so I thought, oh, I can bridge that really easily with one of these die cut words. So any one of those will do the trick, and that will kind of join them together and create a little bit more cohesion on your card. So they kind of look like they're floating right now, but will come together really nicely when you have that bit on there. Unfortunately, I can see that I am frozen on this end again. So what I'm going to do is try coming back to you. Am I frozen on your end as well? Somebody can just type in frozen if we are in that position. That would be helpful. Anya, you must have stamp set. I know it is a must have stamp set. I'm loving mine. Yes, frozen. Thank you, Sue. Okay, so guys, what I'm gonna do is we're gonna hope third time is a charm, and I will try this again and we'll see what else we can manage to show during the rest of the session. Okay, hang in there with me.